You can't talk about Jujutsu Kaisen without talking about the main thread of it all, Ryomen Sukuna. Not only is he intricately connected to Yuji in more ways than even he knew, but he torments our courageous MC any chance he gets. But where did that sadistic personality come from? No one was born evil after all, so let's take a look at Sukuna's life and how he became known as the King of Curses. Born more than 1,000 years ago, Sukuna suffered in the womb of his starving mother, and to avoid dying of malnutrition, he absorbed his twin brother and survived. As his cursed energy and technique advanced, he felt alienated and targeted as a threat to eliminate, rather than a fellow human. So he protected himself with aggression and suppression of emotion. He avoided getting close to anyone, and made sure to keep everyone away with fear and murderous intent. This only further drew negative attention towards him, leading to Jujutsu Society wanting to extinguish him permanently. And it's not their fault for feeling that way, since he killed many sorcerers during the Golden Age. One of the only people Sukuna liked and kept around was Urarame, who became a like-minded protege. During the Heian era, Sukuna's power only grew and led him to facing the Fujiwara's clan's generals and squads. And he destroyed them all with two weapons, named Hiten and Kamutoke. But instead of being feared afterward, he was worshipped as a deity at the Harvest Festival. At the time, Yorozu tried to provide him with company, but Urarame chased her away. And when that didn't work, Sukuna attacked her outright for assuming he was lonely. He did end up dying in a sense, but got help from Kenjaku beforehand to create 20 cursed objects so that he can one day roam again and cause utter panic, death, and chaos. No one would be safe. Fast forward to the present day, and Sukuna's cursed finger objects weren't meant to cause harm, only to survive as long as needed, for him to return in the future. But as centuries passed, they grew in power, until eventually they could attract all sorts of monstrosity, and the only thing that was keeping their full power from escaping were the seals placed on them, but they began to weaken. One such finger was in Sugisawa High School's thermometer box. If not for the occult club seeking mysteries around there, Sukuna may have been incarnated much later on. Whether Kenjaku planned for the students to find the finger isn't specified, but I'm willing to bet he nudged the process along. But anyways, as we know, Sukuna returns in Yuji's body, intending to kill and pillage for women like a Viking, except Yuji can take control of himself whenever he likes, so he's forced to back down. When Yuji switches with him again, as per Gojo's request, the sorcerer makes a fool of him, because he's only 1/20th of his power at that moment. With him planning to kill Gojo the next time he faces him, Sukuna also interrupts conversation at Jujutsu High to know why Gojo isn't the one in charge. Going forward in time, to take out the cursed womb at the detention center, Sukuna gets swapped in and decimates the finger bearer who refuses to work with him. But Yuji can't switch back, which leaves Sukuna demonically happy. Without wasting a second, Sukuna moves outside and rips out Yuji's heart, since he can survive without it. He attacks Megumi and is disappointed in him until he prepares to use Maharaga against him. Then Yuji switches him back out, accepting death. But it's not the last that we see of Sukuna. While in his domain, Sukuna offers a sketchy deal and makes Yuji forget about the enchain part of it after revival. Later on, during a desperate moment, Yuji begs Sukuna for help, only to get laughed at and refused. There's many who think Sukuna couldn't have helped, even if he wanted to. Afterwards, when Mahito tries to transfigure Yuji, Sukuna warns him not to touch him again. Later on, when Yuji enters Mahito's domain to save Nanami, and unintentionally touches Sukuna's soul, he gets swatted as promised with a flick of his hand. But we all know Sukuna's invisible slashes and the power behind them. Or at least we will. During the exchange event, Kenjaku mentions how they need to leave the students alone because one of them is important to Sukuna. Megumi, of course. And this comes back again later. Sukuna's not great at hiding his evil plans, honestly. After the bridge curse and Megumi's domain reveal, Sukuna forcefully eats the finger from the curse that Megumi fought, before Yuji can stop him. This brings him up to 4 fingers total. Later on in Shibuya is when Sukuna starts making more aggressive moves towards his goal. The next time we see him, he senses when Yuji's on the verge of death, surprised by Choso sparing him. Not long after, Geto's allies feed Yuji a finger to ask for Sukuna's help. Minutes later, Jogo feeds him 10 more, and Sukuna evidently takes over from the sudden overload. This brings Sukuna to a whopping 15 fingers in total, with his aura causing fear and panic alone. Still, he makes a deal with Jogo that if he can hit him, he'll help him kill everyone in Shibuya except Megumi, once again telegraphing his future plans too clearly. Honestly, Sukuna versus Jogo is just child's play for him. So easy that he even zips away to toy with the sorcerers nearby to add to his sadistic enjoyment. And then we see him genuinely happy to see Urarame again, a clear indication of how much he appreciates the incarnated sorcerer. But then Sukuna teleports away when he feels that Megumi's in trouble. He saves Haruta to stop the event from ending, heals Megumi, then fights Maharaga to end the ritual. During the fight, he's made aware of the mechanics behind Maharaga's technique and keeps that knowledge for later. After Sukuna drops Megumi off with Shoko so that she can heal him, he plops himself in the middle of the damage to further torture Yuji. And in case you wanted a deeper look at Sukuna's curse techniques and abilities, check out this video I previously made. I'll have it linked at the end. By the way, when Kenjaku activates all of his sleeper agents, he also ends up unsealing the finger that was put into Yuji as a baby, and Sukuna secretly consumes it to add to his power. At this point, Sukuna is just waiting for the right time to cash in his points. Going forward, during the time when Yuji's got a hit put out on him from the higher-ups, Sukuna senses when Akotsu kills Yuji, annoyed that his plan's been ruined. But he smiles when he realizes it was a ploy, and his game over has been reversed. If Akotsu or Gojo knew what would happen if they kept Yuji alive, I think they may have chosen differently. Later on, during a moment of reprieve from the Culling Game, Hanakarusu and Angel agree to work with Yuji and Megumi, if they can help to kill the disgraced one, who turns out to be Sukuna. He proudly tells Yuji that in private to cause him stress and worry, because Yuji just rubs him the wrong way. Plus, he's just petty like that. Then comes the twist that Megumi's stepsister is actually Yorozu, who goes on to make her own Culling Game rule. She then goes off to prepare for a fight with Sukuna, still majorly obsessed with him. During this hectic time, Sukuna uses the Enchain vow he made with Yuji and takes control, then knocks out Hana without injuring her. He rips off a finger so that he can switch to Megumi's body by force. He had no idea if it would work or not, but took a huge chance, probably basing it on his years of experience. And because Yuji made him agree to not hurt anyone, but not Yuji's body, he didn't break their agreement by using his finger to control Megumi. When Sukuna throws Yuji through buildings, he draws the attention of Maki and Takaba. But now he has control of the Ten Shadows technique, and he can even strengthen them, thanks to his cursed energy. He's attacked by Hana and Angel's technique, Jacob's Ladder, but to get her to stop the attack, he pretends he's back to Megumi. Then he chomps her like a demonic Pac-Man, taking her arm. Sukuna has to fight against Yuji next, impressed with his endurance and strength for a human. The others nearby jump in to face him in a high-speed battle, with Megumi interfering to avoid hurting his friends. Likewise, Sukuna's companion, Urarame, shows up to help him to get the upper hand. Unexpectedly, Sukuna appreciates Urarame's help and tells them not to worry when they try to focus on everyone except Yuji. Sukuna doesn't need him as a vessel anymore. He uses Nu to fly off with Urarame, telling them to prepare a special bath to ensure Megumi can't fight him off. And here's the kicker. When Yuji screams at him, Sukuna and Urarame laugh like true psychopaths at his desperation. Later on, the bath is successful. But so that he can squash any chance for Megumi to struggle, he wants to make him watch Sumiki's death. And for that, he needs to ask the Kogane where Yorozu is, so that he can take her down. Kenjaku exchanges Megumi's points to get Sukuna to Sendai, and once there, he kills Ryu instantly, with Uro knowing who he is and fleeing. Sukuna meets with Yorozu after, pretending that he chose Megumi's vessel for his face when it was clearly for the Ten Shadows and the Maharaga Shikigami. They jump into their battle, but all he uses is Megumi's technique, and none of his own. He even summons Maharaga's wheel above his head to test it out, possibly in preparation for his future fight against Gojo. The one-sided fight continues with her true love on full display, and a domain to match. He swaps Maharaga in to get rid of Yorozu's perfect sphere though. Sukuna already knows about her technique, so he knew the Shikigami would work, and that pleases her. As she's dying, she replicates his infamous weapon, the Kamutoke. And with this, Megumi's soul is broken within Sukuna, exactly as he wanted. Between him and Mahito, the poor kids from Jujutsu High are filled with trauma. After a while, Sukuna arrives to stop Gojo from fighting Kenjaku after he's released from the prison realm, reminding him of the promise that he made to end Gojo before anyone else. However, before the big fight, Sukuna eats the leftover fingers from Urarame and his mummified body from the Heian era. It's as nasty as you'd expect it to be. After, Sukuna discusses with Urarame about Yuji and how he was a product of not only Kenjaku's tampering, but his twin that he consumed in the womb. But even knowing that doesn't make him more kind or partial to Yuji, considering at this point he is essentially Yuji's uncle. Then starts the epic clash with Gojo. It's a sequence of domain battles, with Sukuna and Gojo evenly matched, and finding new ways to one-up each other. Even when he thinks his dismantle slashes have gotten the best of him, Gojo finds a way to heal everything up. But once Sukuna gets Maharaga involved in the domains, it's the beginning of Gojo's downfall. But they're both unable to use domains afterwards, which leads into a brawl and destruction of surrounding buildings. Knowing Gojo's time is running out thanks to Maharaga's wheel, he enjoys every twist and turn of their fight. But it ends with him using a ton of cursed energy, using combined Shikigamis, and eventually killing Gojo, thanks to Maharaga's adaptability that he used on his slashing techniques. To get around Gojo's limitless, he developed a slash that can cut through space itself entirely. But it brings us to a scene between Kashimo and Sukuna, considering the relationship between the weak and the strong. Then Yuji and Higuruma jump in for their turn. And with that, round 3 begins. Sukuna's forced into a trial, aware of all the rules cause he heard them within Yuji. This is also a useful excuse so that Gege doesn't have to waste time explaining everything. But Higuruma's a lawyer, not a fighter, so he struggles against Sukuna even with the executioner's sword. Kusakabe protects him, and Sukuna immediately can tell that everyone involved has leveled up in the past few months, compared to when he previously observed them in Shibuya. Choso stands no chance with piercing blood, nor does Ino using a blunt weapon, which Sukuna instantly recognizes as Nanami's, thanks to Yuji's memories again. Sukuna realizes the main object is getting Higuruma to take him out, so they're all defending him, but it's not enough, though he does get impressed by him using domain amplification and stopping and starting his curse technique fluidly the way that he can. Yuji steps in front of Sukuna, just causing more annoyance for him since he's over him, even though he's related to his deceased twin. Sukuna slashes up Higuruma, waiting for him to heal, even telling him his next move. Before he does, Choso shoots Sukuna with blood, allowing Higuruma time to heal his limbs and step in. But he's bested, and throws his weapon to Yuji, who stabs Sukuna. Sukuna seems unbothered by the last second attack, using his multiple arms to pummel Yuji. Yes, he's taken on his former appearance now that he can. Sukuna notices that even though Higuruma died, quote-unquote, he lost his main weapon. And this is when he first sees Yui helping to move the injured quickly away. But he also spots Yuji healing himself with reverse curse technique, something he didn't have a month ago. As much as he's interested in considering this, he's also frustrated by it and loses himself in his thought. I'd say he's possibly upset, or as much as someone like him could be, about Higuruma being out of the fight. He was expecting him to be the next Gojo in terms of overwhelming power and flexibility. Sukuna also reminisces on the past and how his ideals aren't as prominent as these people trying to kill him as their ultimate goal. He especially doesn't appreciate Yuji's ability to overcome impossible situations because of his strength of will alone. I don't blame Sukuna in this instance, as he hasn't watched battle anime the way that we have. So to further his own goals, Sukuna activates another rule from Megumi's points, intending to merge with Tengen as Kenjaku wanted, absorbing what I assume to be the cursed womb of Tengen himself. Sukuna openly states his plan: kill everyone, including the Culling Game players, then merge the population of Japan with the Culling Game barrier imbued with Tengen to create a curse monstrosity unlike the world had ever seen, and see how things go from there. But Yuta and Rika arrive, and when Sukuna threatens him, Rika, the queen, as he calls her, unsurprisingly tries to squash Sukuna. Sukuna's reverse curse technique starts coming back, which means his domain is next, and he relies on small slashes to defend himself while trying to grab Yuta's weapon in a clever move, not to mention his extra mouth. Then Sukuna gets pulled into Yuta's copy-filled domain, but puts up hollow wicker basket in defense, still relying on Yuji's memories to consider Yuta's plan and technique. He figures out their scheme, but finds it humorous more than anything. When does Sukuna ever seem like he's being pressured? However, Sukuna's attacked by the domain and Rika and Yuji at the same time. Currently, he can't use his domain and has the same cursed energy level as Yuta, and can't blast out Dismantle or the world-cutting technique since he has the barrier activated. Then, he is ganged up on by Yuji and Yuta trying to remove his extra limbs, while also attacking his connection to Megumi's soul to split them apart. When he's about to slash Yuji into pieces, Yuta uses cursed speech on him to freeze him. Then an ice technique. But Sukuna's still smiling because he's liking the challenge that they're giving him with their overall combined strength. Maybe it reminds him of the good old days, but we'll probably never know. Yuta uses the ink curse technique on Sukuna, or precognition as he calls it, quickly figuring out that Yuta can't copy Limitless without Gojo's 6th eye, but he's not expecting at all that Yuta would use his cleave against him. Sukuna needs to know how and when he was able to copy it, but he's told a lie, which he only finds out later, and Sukuna is pummeled this time. But even without smiling, you can tell that he's not done yet. Yuta takes an arm, and his mouth is slashed to stop hand signs and chanting. But as Yuta prepares to charge in, Sukuna is taken aback by Yuji's blood erupting. Then Yuji holds him in place, while Yuta uses Jacob's ladder thanks to Hana. Though they underestimated how little Megumi had in him, Sukuna easily turns the tides again, until a certain heavenly restricted fighter breaks into the battle for her turn alongside Ino. Sukuna nearly slashes Yuta in half, with Yuji breaking the domain to signal Maki's entrance, but his wounds are taking longer to heal this time because of Maki's soul-splitting katana targeting his soul itself. Plus, he had no time to compensate for it, especially after the technically advanced struggle between him and Gojo. And Sukuna faces Maki, and enjoys it, even comparing her to Maharaga in terms of analysis and potential. After sending her flying, Ino jumps in, but Sukuna notices the weapon is different from before. It's because Kusakabe now has it for a surprise attack, but Sukuna figured it out, so it wasn't that successful. For Sukuna, Maki's his total opposite, and as much as he enjoys powerful sorcerers, he likes her just as well for what she can accomplish as a rejection of the norm, and because he wants to prove that he is stronger than her. So he black flashes her, which is luck, I know, but he assumes it's enough to take her down. With Kusakabe being the only one left standing, Sukuna wonders how a sword-drawing technique can match his long-range slashes. He enjoys playing with him, but notices that he can't block every slash with a grin, intending to end it. Kusakabe shows off his barrier skills, but Sukuna reads his next attack from experience. He slices him with an X, and as he plans to end Yui Yui's rescue services, Miguel steps in, which he was not familiar with using Yuji's memories. Sukuna faces him and LaRue, not bothered by missing his domain and a slow healing heart, He understands but doesn't care for LaRue's technique, focusing instead on Miguel. With Miguel's simple yet effective technique, Sukuna's taken aback and has to split his attention with Choso shoots him again. If Sukuna wants to slice through anything again, he not only has to use palm signs and hand signs, but also a chant because of the binding vow that he made. And he can't believe Maki's back after a direct black flash. But he lands another on LaRue, which means he's recovering quicker. Sukuna's looming return to full power calls for Choso and Yuji's duo to put pressure on him. But another black flash is used, causing him to replenish again. As Choso uses Supernova, Sukuna speeds in and hits him with black flash. But Sukuna sees the blood armor take some damage, not ready for Yuji's next hit. Their brawl turns into close combat with Yuji shooting him with blood, and Sukuna sensing Yuji's own black flash coming, but unable to avoid it due to LaRue's technique. Now it's time to get serious. Sukuna gets a taste of his own medicine, not only with black flash, but a modified slashing technique because of their shared body. Sukuna notices the power isn't as strong as it could be, but the points he hits are the issue. Sukuna's jumped by Ino once again, but he's kind of like a fly to him. Then more black flashes are given out, which frustrates Sukuna. So he relies on Dismantle to drive Yuji away. He receives another black flash for his troubles, and another, even after trying to destroy his face. And an exhausted Ino throws Nanami's weapon to allow Yuji a chance to keep pressuring. But it's time for one more round, and Sukuna opens his domain expansion thanks to a whole bunch of binding vows placed on it. He can't hold it for long though, but with enough luck he can use it for his next trick. Divine Flame. Sukuna's fire in the domain is inescapable, and it takes down Choso, sacrificing himself to protect Yuji. Once the domain and the fire are gone, Sukuna's left standing in front of the fake brother duo. Now the King of Curses has to face the position swapping that Mahito did, but with massive improvement. And Sukuna recognizes that Todo is his own kind of beast, and hard to handle. With no way to know when a switch will happen, Sukuna can only rely on when Yuji will use Black Flash to attack. But he didn't consider the crows flying around as possible choices. Or simply just not swapping at all. But then he's faced with ultimate power once more. As Sukuna tries to hold Yuji back, he opens his domain. But so does Gojo, who is actually just Yuta inside of his body. And frankly, Sukuna's impressed by the lengths that he's willing to go, copying Kenjaku's brain-switching ability. So the domain battle begins again, but at a very crucial time in the battle royale. With them fighting for dominion, it becomes a time-limited duel, and Sukuna's intent on massacring everyone. Sukuna shows off his ability to use domain amplification inside of a domain too. The fight's pretty even, except that Yuta's using a body that he's not used to, and it's giving Sukuna openings to overtake him. Nothing could prepare Sukuna for Yuta using blue, purple, and a recording of Inumaki's technique. The domain battle ends, with Sukuna hurt, but not down. And Yuta runs out of time due to how Kenjaku's curse technique works. Then Sukuna hits Todo with an immediate black flash, but he's still able to continue swapping and confusing Sukuna. Then Yuji strikes at Sukuna's connection with Megumi with ease, and forces him to cough up a finger, proving that it's effective. Then Hana returns above him, striking him with a weaker version of Jacob's ladder due to her injury. Sukuna quickly jumps at her, trying to stop it permanently, but before he can end her, Todo takes the black flash Sukuna sends out, leaving him with just Yuji. He flings Sukuna down to the ground like a wrestler, but thanks to the black flashes, Sukuna has his healing back. Still, Sukuna has to be careful now that he's more cursed than human, and Yuji can target his soul at any moment. But the unthinkable happens. Yuji drags him into his own domain expansion. Sukuna humors Yuji, since he knows that Yuji isn't trying to kill him at this moment, but he sees no point to trying to get him to change when he's fine with how things are. He still doesn't feel remorse or anything else for that matter, but what gets a reaction from him is feeling like Yuji pities him, which only makes him want to kill everyone even more. Sukuna uses Hollow Wicker Basket to counter the domain, while he waits for his curse technique to recover, but he's been rattled by Yuji's comments, and he's not as focused, which is also when Megumi fights from within using shadows. It helps Sukuna be overtaken, and that's when Sukuna notices Yuji's missing finger. He realizes too late that it means that his last finger is elsewhere, to which it cuts to Nobara, who finally awakens and uses her resonance technique on the last Sukuna finger, leaving him vulnerable and hit by Yuji's dismantle. Sukuna refuses to believe that he'll lose, and that's when Divergent Fist hits him again, followed by Black Flash. Backed into a corner, Sukuna tries to convince Megumi that he doesn't want his body back by reminding him of his losses and mistakes. However, it just makes him sound desperate to survive. After his plan fails, his remnants are blasted out, and even then, given the choice to go back to Yuji, he decides death is a better option. This leads Ororame to follow him to the other side. The last we see of Sukuna is in a space between life and death, which is fitting as he sent many characters to this same place. Here, Sukuna meets Mahito and decides to change his decisions should he return, especially since he has Ororame to bring along this time. And that is Sukuna fully explained. Just who is this gender-swapped Maki who looks eerily familiar to Megumi, but older and rougher around the edges? And why is he so prominent in Gojo and Geto's past? And let's not skip over the fact that he's voiced by the infamous Dio from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. So I guess it is a JoJo reference this time. But let's get into why this man is so important to the Jujutsu Kaisen story. Toji Fushiguro was previously a member of the Zhoniin clan, but left just like Maki did, because he was treated poorly for having no cursed energy at birth. After years of discrimination, he obviously developed something of a thick skin, and that also brewed hatred against cursed technique users. Back when Toji still lived with the Zhoniin family, he went to find a young Gojo, curious what someone born with so many gifts would look like. And Toji was definitely surprised, even then, by how bold and fearless Gojo was. Not to mention the fact that Toji couldn't take Gojo by surprise, even at his young age. He prided himself on being able to sneak up on anyone unnoticed, so this was likely a blow to his ego. As an adult, Toji fell in love with and married a woman whose last name he took to replace Zhoniin, Fushiguro. She had a daughter before getting involved with Toji, who we met in the first season, named Sumiki. Likewise, he had his son Megumi from a prior relationship too. This same past lover was part of the reason he left the Zhoniin clan as well. And despite how poorly they treated Toji for not having cursed energy, and not being of use to them without jujitsu, the clan still acknowledged his strength and prowess as a fighter. Some members were even glad Toji left, because they thought he would have retaliated against their clan and slaughtered them all if he had stayed. When Megumi and Sumiki were still young, Toji skipped town with Sumiki's mother, but not before making a sneaky deal with the head of the Zhoniin clan, Naobito, that involved handing Megumi over. It might not have been a bad decision, but the way Gojo described the trade made Toji sound like a real dirtbag. Maybe Gojo was just mad that Toji left him with unfinished business, and knew he couldn't deny the man on his deathbed. More on that in a bit. Strangely enough, the man who hires Toji, Shiu, asks about his son Megumi, and Toji acts as if he doesn't know the name. This is interesting, as it can be seen in a few ways. Either Toji doesn't want to get too attached, and so is purposely detaching himself by acting cold this way, knowing that Megumi will live a vastly different life than his own. Or Toji doesn't want anyone to realize the connection between them and wants to keep a distance by pretending to not remember his own son's name. And the fact that it's a female name just drives the point further home. Regardless, the deal with Naobito was also a way for Toji to ensure Megumi's survival in the future. That's why we see Gojo taking Megumi under his wing and telling him about his good-for-nothing dad, who left without saying anything. But Toji didn't just leave and become a lazy, rich jerk spending all his human trafficking money. No, he became known as the Sorcerer Killer, a name he wears proudly. As it happens, being born without cursed energy, but within a family of cursed technique users grants you a supremely strong body, and this is called a heavenly restriction. It's along the same vein as what Mekamaru mentions having, but works the opposite side of the spectrum. A crazy strong body for a lack of sorcery to use. Imagine being granted extreme strength, speed, and reflexes just because you can't see some floating creatures. Sign me up! Plus, there's always ways around getting rid of curses, even without cursed energy, like tools and weapons imbued with it. Anyway, Toji does his thing for a while, gets paid, and lives a good life with his unnamed Fushiguro wife. It's still kind of weird that we never know her name, or even Megumi's mother's name, but that's another story. The problems arise when Toji starts to get greedy, but not just that, he wants to prove to his clan and all the curse technique users that he's better than them. And how best to do this? Well, by going after one of, if not the best, Jujutsu users in the world, the owner of the Six Eyes and the Limitless techniques. Limitless alone is a massively powerful curse technique, but having it combined with the Six Eyes, only available to the Gojo clan as far as we know, makes it darn near impossible to beat. And let's not forget the fact that any owner of Limitless hadn't had the Six Eyes technique for 100 years before Gojo was born. But none of that matters in Toji's mind. He's got more experience and the ability to get the jump on basically anyone he wants. This leads us to the hidden inventory arc. Once Gojo and Geto are tasked with accompanying the star plasma vessel to Tengen and assuring that the weird immortal guy doesn't become something beyond human, Toji jumps on the chance to work for one of the groups looking to stop them. As it turns out, the Time Vessel Association, a group devoid of any curse technique users, is the organization that approached him. Pretty funny to have all of these non-cursing people working together against some of the strongest Jujutsu users around. How could Toji resist? Plus, he'd get a hefty payment for his involvement. If you're good at something, why do it for free? Toji seems almost giddy at the thought of how fun it'll be to take down two of the strongest Jujutsu using students, far surpassing their peers and not even in their prime yet. Gojo is the main goal, but Geto is just a bonus to test out his improved power and experience. Toji's not stupid though. He's got a plan, and honestly, it's pretty simple. It involves two steps. One, putting out a bounty on the star plasma vessel's head to tire out the students. And two, he just has to let the other group, Cursed Users Q, try their best to stop the merger with Tengen as well. Basically, Toji wants them to do all the dirty work, and then he'll swoop in for the kill once Gojo has depleted himself. At that point, Toji can quickly take him down and move on to the girl. Geto isn't really a threat in his mind, to be honest. And considering how their confrontation goes, Toji's judgment was pretty spot on. Now, after some flashy fights and some easy escapes from not so great cursed users trying to either ensure Tengen involves or stop Tengen from being polluted by the star plasma vessel, the young Jujutsu duo go on vacation to Okinawa. What's Toji doing during this time? He's just waiting and watching the countdown on the bounty slowly run out. Since the students are taking a break, this is probably a good time to dive into just what Toji can do and why he's such a devastating opponent to be against. Toji has got speed, stamina, reflexes, and strength beyond any other non-curse using person, but he easily surpassed most Jujutsu users with those talents alone. When those qualities are combined with his insane weapon usage, and his ease at using his honed senses to track down and kill his targets, there's no wonder the Zhoniin clan was glad to see him leave. As a side note, the cursed worm that he uses to store his weaponry is so much like the shadows that Megumi uses to keep his own in, like father, like son. But back to the students. They return from their vacay, ready to drop off the star plasma vessel with no issue, and their guard completely down now that the bounty is over. And that's right when Toji makes his insane entrance, stabbing Gojo in the back. Toji pretends like he doesn't know exactly who he just stabbed, playing up his cockiness, and glad that he didn't get found out like when Gojo was a kid. Geto sends a curse to swallow Toji, but the sorcerer killer quickly makes work of it, even breaking out a large grin. And despite these feats, he still feels like he's losing some of his touch for not having killed Gojo immediately. Gojo, heavily relying on his cursed energy to face Toji, is struggling. The man is a beast with none to speak of after all. Sure, he gets a few good hits in, but he's not rested enough to fully put Toji down. But first, let's talk about the sponsor of this video, Extra Wallet. So guys, I can't express to you how much I love the Extra Wallet. I've been using it for over 2 years now, and it's never let me down once. Like 6 out of 10 times when I use this in public, I always get compliments on it, or I'm just asked like what it is. It's slim and sleek, holds 6 of your cards and easily pop out with the click of a button. That never gets old. It also has an RFID plate on the back. This is the carbon fiber version, but I also have the matte black version, which is so sexy. Extra also has a key case, and just like their wallets conveniently holds your keys, it even holds my gym membership. But another thing that you can get with the key case is this key tracker. Simply just connect it to the Chipolo app in your phone, and you'll always know where your keys are in case you lose them by accident. I mean, we've all been there. Also guys, Extra has their summer sale going on right now, and if you use my code Zhoniin, you're going to be able to get up to 25% off of all collections and your purchase. So guys, check out the link in the description to get your very own Extra products today, and make sure you use code Zhoniin at checkout. Thanks guys. After throwing out some fly curses, that's when Toji takes out the inverted spear of heaven and strikes Gojo right in the throat. The amount of slashes and stabs that follow is not only shocking but awe-inspiring. Not only did he overcome Gojo's senses, but Toji caused enough damage that Gojo should never be able to fight again. That's the problem though. We know from season 1 that Gojo does fight again, and at a much higher level. Let's get back to Toji's rampage for now though. Geto is the next victim of Toji's supreme hunting skills and stands no chance against him in the fight. Oh, and let's not forget how he made sure to blow away the star plasma vessel right as he was deciding she wanted to be a carefree young girl instead of fodder for some weird multi-eyed dude. I know Toji was paid to complete a job, but my god, that headshot was brutal, and the timing of it, ruining a heartfelt moment like that. Not that stabbing Gojo in the neck and the forehead was any kinder, but anyway. Geto loses his mind, having formed a bond with Riko, the same way Gojo did, and tries to at least take down or capture Toji to repay what had happened to her and his buddy. But it's all for naught, because Toji is just that much better, and part of an underground world of violence and death. And having his lack of cursed energy become a gift is truly the cherry on top. His worm friend can be stored inside of his mouth, hiding all of his weapons, and no one would sense a thing. Not even Gojo and his 6 eyes. The whole Zhoniin clan's treatment of him built his character alright. At this point, for some reason, Toji remembers the name Megumi and what it represents, reminding himself that he wanted his son to live a long life, instead of trying to destroy Geto like he did Gojo. A reminder of his clan and the 3 families, he leaves him there unconscious, knowing that he should survive. He even points out that he doesn't want to kill him, since he doesn't use Shikigami, like the 10 Shadows technique of his clan. Toji has had a grudge against the big 3, and he won't ever let go of it. Toji's point was proven. You don't need to have cursed energy to take down people with the best techniques. In fact, he calls himself a monkey, the same way Geto describes all non-curse seeing people in the future. After getting his money and thinking he'll take it easy now, Gojo is back from the dead. Okay, he's not really a zombie or anything, he's just figured out how to use reverse curse technique on himself before dying. If not for Gojo's survival and growth, a lot of characters wouldn't even be a part of Jujutsu Society, like Yuta and Yuji. They would have been executed immediately. Toji is clearly shocked, but not so much that he thinks he can't cut him down again this time. Toji rushes in like some kind of speed demon, slashing and trying to kill Gojo with every move. But thanks to him and his pushing of Gojo far past his limits by being a worthy challenger, Gojo develops some crazy techniques to use in a fight, and also to enhance his movements and attacks. Gojo's red technique hits Toji, and he gets thrown across the field, smashing into the building. His heavenly body keeps him alive and fighting though. In moments, he's come up with a plan to counter anything Gojo has planned next, but he senses he's in trouble. This time, Toji stands no chance, and doesn't live to regret his decision to take on the strongest just to prove the Zhoniin how wrong they were. If anything, he just cemented Gojo into history as the strongest sorcerer alive through his creation of Hollow Purple in their fight. But sometimes hunting small prey gets boring, and you just want to hunt another apex predator. That was the sorcerer's mistake. It's clear as Toji's dying, half of his body blown away from Gojo's attack, that he wishes he'd made better decisions in his life. He just wanted to live free of hierarchy and power struggles, for everyone to be equal and not have to worry about what they're born with or how powerful they are. In his last moments, Toji couldn't help but picture Megumi though. In a way, he just wants to make sure that his son doesn't get the same cold treatment he did within the clan. Megumi has a cursed technique after all, and he is a blessing. Thankfully, Gojo does find Megumi and becomes a pretty good mentor to him. But let's not forget how lucky Megumi was to get the 10 Shadows technique from the Wicked bloodline that he and his father rejected. Maybe Toji should have been worrying about his cousins, Mai and Maki instead, especially Maki with the same burden of having no cursed energy. But that isn't the end of good old Toji. Does anyone stay dead in this freaking series? I mean, come on, Yuji, Gojo, now Toji? Because now we're getting into Toji's second coming. The flashback arc is so important as an origin story for Gojo and his friends, but it also makes us see the buildup and return of some deadly antagonists. It puts power levels into better perspective too. So I bet you're wondering how the infamous sorcerer killer comes back, right? Did he have cursed energy after all? Nah. During the Shibuya arc, Toji's soul is summoned through a granny cursed user named Ogami, intent on destroying everyone involved with Gojo. Jujutsu users are using their curse techniques for good, and she can't stand them getting in the way of her monstrous deeds. This is pretty crazy if you think about it. Toji went after Gojo to prove a point to himself and his clan, but was taken down. And in the same way, this granny and her partner Jiro were stopped from murdering as soon as he was born, because he introduced a whole new level of policing within the Jujutsu world. Plus, they were supposed to kill him and nearly crapped their pants instead. Just coming into the world made people hate Gojo and try their best to get rid of everything he represented. What makes this even more ridiculous is that Gojo himself doesn't like Jujutsu's treatment of sorcerers who don't fit their ideal and had considered killing off the elders himself, something Toji would have wholeheartedly agreed with. Anyway, Ogami's grandson turns out to be too weak to fight Toji's soul off when she uses her seance technique, and he takes over and basically goes back to his sorcerer hunting ways with ease. It probably has to do with Toji's body having that heavenly restriction on it, but too bad they didn't consider that when they summoned him as a pawn. For all we know, maybe Toji sensed Gojo around and really wanted a second chance at taking him down. Toji fights everyone off so easily. It's not even funny. They're literal jokes to him, and he's just stepping on people like Ino and Ogami like they're ants. With nothing but fighting and getting rid of cursed energy havers in his mind, Toji forces himself into Dagon's water-filled domain through a hole Megumi had created. And because of that, he ends up saving Nanami, Megumi, and Maki from an impossible situation. Oh, and the head of the Zhoniin clan. But I'm sure Toji cannot care less about that old dude. Toji not only yoinks Maki's favorite weapon from her, Playful Cloud, but sharpens it into a point, and then defeats that special grade curse like it's a goldfish rather than a high-level threat. And it's like he's been brought right back to his final mission, stabbing with the same intensity he used against Gojo all those years ago. Toji seeks out his next strongest opponent, but since most are already pretty battered from the Dagon fight, Megumi is the only one that's left for him to take on. Megumi's holding his own, but Toji is too fast and seasoned of a fighter to fall for tricks like the escape rabbit or the shadows on the ground. Toji still ends up impressed, and somewhere deep down he recognizes something about the dark-haired kid. Yeah, Megumi might be older now, but it's hard to forget a child, right? It snaps him back to his real self. After Toji calms down a bit, asking his name, all the pieces click into place. Toji's proud to find out that not only is his son alive, but he took a better name than the discriminating Zhoniin one. That's enough for him to end the fight by stabbing himself, much like what he did to Gojo. If only he told Megumi who he was beforehand. But oh well, I guess. At least we know the truth about them. With any luck, someone else might try to summon Toji, and he can get a proper final goodbye with Megumi. So in this one, we're going to be talking about Kenjaku, the guy who took over Geto's body. So who exactly is this body-snatching guy whose face changes quicker than her revolving door? Besides being very old and a worse father than Toji was to Megumi, there's a lot to uncover about Kenjaku's story. So Kenjaku's worst deeds start around the Meiji era, which is like 1868 to 1912. But he's actually over 1,000 years old, which is why he's so well acquainted with the immortal Tengen. Around 400 years ago, Kenjaku was in an unknown man's body, which is what he used to make binding vows with ancient sorcerers. That's also when Kenjaku convinced an aging Hajime Kashimo to become a cursed object so he could return later and fight Sukuna to prove which of them is the new strongest. But that's not all Kenjaku was up to. For centuries, the Six Eyes and Star Plasma vessels have gotten in the way of Kenjaku's goals and extensive plans. Even when he took them out, a new vessel would be born,
and a user of the Six Eyes would appear at the right time. This is why Kenjaku focuses on other ways to get them out of the picture. Toji's help also played a major and unexpected role in his success, since he both killed a vessel on the day of the merger and created a rift between Gojo and the owner of the Six Eyes and curse manipulation user Geto. But let's jump back a bit. Around 150 years ago, before the start of the series, Noritoshi Kamo's body was taken over by Kenjaku, and the man already had a temple to use. So it was a no-brainer for him to use that place for nefarious experiments with blood manipulation techniques. There, the sorcerer imprisoned a woman who could bear children with curses and created hybrid babies with her, while adding in his own blood as well. Originally, she had gone there for protection, but that didn't turn out so great. Kenjaku made her have 9 abortions, creating the death-painting wombs. The 2 brothers we saw confront Yuji and Nobara, Eso and Kechizu, are technically related to him, and we'll get to how later. But the other 7 children were named Naranzo, Shouso, Tanzo, Sanso, Kotsuso, Shoso, and Choso, who plays an important role down the line. This not only made Kamo's namesake gain the title of the most evil sorcerer in history because of that, but likely tarnished the clan's reputation. After all, that Kenjaku only really wanted to find out what would be created and how interesting and strong the entities would become. Not to mention there must be a lot of ego involved, since he made himself the 3rd parent to these children. But how does Kenjaku keep jumping around these bodies like this? Well, the hint is in the stitches. He basically performs brain surgery, taking over bodies to use as his new form, and using his brain as the control center. Kenjaku also gains their curse technique, or whatever the previous body had available, and the transition is seamless. Even Gojo's highly coveted Six Eyes couldn't see through this nasty technique. But anyway, after disappearing for a while, Kenjaku finds more subjects to experiment on. This time it involves Yuji's mother, Kaori, whose body he takes over despite Yuji's grandfather, Wasuke, warning Yuji's father, Jin, of the danger of that woman. Yuji's eventually left alone. It's not clear what Kenjaku did with their bodies, but we can assume they both died. Kenjaku's involvement in Yuji's creation also explains why he, even prior to learning about cursed energy, was so physically gifted and athletic. And because he helped birth Yuji, whether literally or just with his blood, this makes Yuji a sibling to the cursed wombs he unknowingly fought and killed. Perhaps that explains why Yuji felt bad when he saw them crying. As if that wasn't enough already, Kenjaku had the finger planted in Junpei's home in order to trigger his curse technique through negative emotions. He might not have meant for the young man to be killed by Mahito, but he didn't care either. Anything to further his plans and to test things out. Around this time is likely when Kenjaku also laid the foundations for spreading cursed energy to non-jujitsu users in hopes of creating more of them. A lot of them weren't compatible with this process though, like Megumi's sister Sumiki, who fell into a coma. Of course, there was a solution to that which requires some time to be resolved, and Kenjaku is nothing if not patient. But was Megumi's sister chosen simply because of bad luck, or because of the importance Megumi would play in Sukuna's return due to his 10 Shadows technique? It's hard to say, but Kenjaku probably thought he might need Megumi's shadows against Gojo to take down the Limitless and Six Eyes combination. But going further, in 2018, Suguru Geto returns from the dead? Not really. With a useful technique like her spirit manipulation, there was no way Kenjaku could pass up on the chance to acquire this corpse, since Gojo was too attached to his deceased best friend to destroy his body completely. With his body, Kenjaku made temporary allies of the special great curses, Mahito, Jogo, Hanami, and Dagon. But they're all just a means to a bigger research project he's been working on. And seeing as they had Gojo as a common threat, they agreed to work with Kenjaku to get the Six Eyes user out of the way. Before they could proceed, they needed to acquire the prison realm and see just how powerful Sukuna was now. Kenjaku suggested sealing Gojo as the only way to defeat him, while carefully keeping himself out of sight from any jujitsu sorcerer who could recognize his body. He also didn't fight anyone to avoid leaving residuals behind, which Gojo would have immediately picked up on. With the finger planted at Junpei's house returned to Jujutsu High, Kenjaku now knows where to find the ones they have stored there. Yes, he put a tracker on it, but he can't go himself. Again, because, people would see him. At the same time, 3 of the wombs he created are stolen by Mahito. Days later, the curse hybrids are given bodies, and sent on an errand to get more Sukuna fingers and keep him on Kenjaku's side. Choso is left behind, but surprisingly doesn't even sense his creator's presence in Geto's body. Then comes October 31st. For the prison realm to work, it takes 20 minutes of preparation, and a full minute to seal the victim. So after everything was set up in Shibuya thanks to those working with him, Kenjaku used the body he was in to more or less neutralize Gojo, but not before making sure to drain Gojo's mind thoroughly, similarly to the way Toji did in the past. As we've seen, Gojo was extremely attached to Geto, so seeing his friend back from the dead ensured Gojo would be too stunned to escape, and got locked inside the prison realm. Despite being an evil mastermind, not everything Kenjaku wanted during this battle came to pass. He missed out on absorbing Jogo because Sukuna killed him, but he did get his hands on Mahito, so he can now activate his trap card. I mean, the cursed energy that he had spread out years ago, and allowing those incompatible bodies to be transfigured and capable of wielding cursed techniques, or be turned into proper vessels like Yuji. Even a combination of Jujutsu students and Todo's teacher Yuki aren't enough to take Kenjaku down before he unleashes transfiguration on the marked people. Luckily for us, using idle transfiguration was a one-time deal, since Kenjaku absorbed Mahito and expended him with an Uzumaki attack. But to be fair, Mahito was planning to attack Kenjaku anyway. Afterwards, Kenjaku left with another ancient sorcerer named Urarame, preparing his next big moves. And that brings us to the Culling Game. The Culling Game is one of the final steps towards Kenjaku's ultimate goal of making the entire population of Japan merge with Tengen. He started the game, but he's not the game master, meaning he can't change how it's played. Well, at least for the most part. But the technique he used not only brought back old threats, but created new curse technique users from regular people to join the game. Non-combatants were allowed to leave the colonies because their lives wouldn't be spared in the end regardless. Keep in mind, all these normal people would be fodder for the massive curse spirit Kenjaku wants to create. But anyway, remember that guy Kashimo? Well, he's brought back as promised. There's also Angel, who is inside of Hanakurusu, much like Sukuna and Yuji. And there's also Yorozu, who reincarnates inside of Sumiki's body. And then there's those who are unfortunate enough to face off with Yuta Kotsu and a few others. Kenjaku takes over the Kamo clan, forcing our young Noritoshi out. Considering the blood manipulation technique he has, the cursed wombs are like ancestors to him, and vastly more potent since they don't have to worry about bleeding to death like a human would. So with Gojo sealed, and the Zenin clan destroyed by Maki, there aren't many people who can oppose Kenjaku in his role in the Jujutsu world. But Kenjaku inadvertently created a potentially more powerful version of Toji Zenin with his Culling Game colonies. After all the panic and death from Shibuya, Kenjaku goes to the USA and lets them know of an untapped power source in Japan, cursed energy, but not warning them of the dangers of curses. Evidently, it's to try to create more means of cursed energy, aka negative energy, and death through having them join in the games and being killed or taking down sorcerers. The country agrees and sends 800 militants over to kidnap as many Jujutsu users as possible, since Gojo is already sealed and not a threat. But Kenjaku doesn't create chaos just for the sake of it. He wants to know what will happen if Tengen and all of Japan create a massive cursed spirit and what it would look like. Likewise, Tengen knows the ancient sorcerer and the way he thinks as well, and even prepares a means to free Gojo before they're confronted by Kenjaku. Another slight wrench in Kenjaku's big lifetime goal. And because Tengen didn't merge with Riko Amane 12 years ago and evolved, they became closer to a curse. This makes Kenjaku's curse manipulation perfect to control the ancient immortal. There's a small issue to deal with first though. Yuki and Choso are there to protect anything from happening to Tengen. They do their best to stop Kenjaku, but are no match for his experience and the amount of curse techniques he's acquired over time. He devastates Yuki with a tiny Uzumaki attack aimed at a lethal area, and she resorts to using a black hole against him, ultimately failing, and Choso is sent away to reunite with Yuji and the rest who oppose Kenjaku. The evil sorcerer finds Tengen's true body and continues forward. However, Kenjaku can't begin the merger until the Culling Game is over, since he took a binding vow beforehand. So that's another issue he has to deal with. He tries to overcome it by adding more rules, eventually glitching the Game Master out to force his success. But that's when Gojo is finally released. Kenjaku is notified at the exact moment and reveals the insane location he had left the prison realm in hopes of slowing him down or killing Gojo. But instead, he's confronted by the man himself with a warning. Gojo's planning to get rid of Sukuna and Kenjaku on December 24th, the day that Geto was killed in the past. Until the fight begins, Kenjaku's stuck by Sukuna's side because he'll be instantly killed by Gojo, indicating he knows he's weaker than him. But at the same time, he knows that if Gojo loses, the rest of the Jujutsu users will go after Sukuna, so he's free to do as he pleases, which is a lot of killing of the Culling Game players in the way of his merger. Seems like his patience is starting to run thin.
Part of why the Culling Game is so important to Kenjaku is that he needs as much cursed energy built up as possible. So it's only normal that when he asks the Kogane how many players died from refusing to fight, he's disappointed in how large the number is. In case you're wondering, 61 people died by forced curse technique removal. Likewise, Kenjaku doesn't like Tengen for never trying to engage physically or facing down a threat to reach a greater goal. But he has other things to worry about, like how much time he has before the Jujutsu sorcerers come after him after dealing with Sukuna. But at least Gojo and Kashimo don't seem to be threats anymore. With that in mind, Kenjaku goes off to get rid of the players not doing what he wants them to do. The first one happens to be an incarnated woman trying her best to escape Kenjaku as he hunts her down. He catches her, of course, choking her with a curse he covers her head with. No remorse for what he's doing to someone he brought back to life. She's played her part after all. Now he just needs to get to his end goal of amassing enough cursed energy to combine with Tengen and all of Japan. Another player, Hazunoki, shows up wondering how Kenjaku finds them so easily. As it turns out, the incarnated sorcerers are tagged with the cursed objects he used to bring them back, while awakened sorcerers have a seal on them that he can track. Either way, Kenjaku can find them anytime he wants to, but before that, he checks in on Mei's live stream, glad to see that Gojo has lost. And even if someone other than Hazunoki wanted to come fight Kenjaku, he has arrangements in place already. For one, he's the second best barrier user besides Tengen, and he's hidden cursed spirits with barriers around him and Shinjuku. They're probably not very strong, but their job is to monitor any changes in cursed energy and their movements. So if someone such as Akotsu Yuta would be headed towards Kenjaku, he would know immediately. He also made sure to see what the curses see, so he can't be taken by surprise by a player without cursed energy, like Maki. But Kenjaku isn't saying all of that to prove how prepared he is. Rather, it's a way to make Hazunoki feel even more alone than he did before. Seeing as he refused to be Kenjaku's friend earlier, the fight begins with no warning, Kenjaku having sent out curses against Hazunoki in a flash. If you recall, the incarnated sorcerer can remove parts of his body and use them as explosives, and reverse curse technique is in his arsenal as well. But is that enough to escape this onslaught of attacks from Kenjaku? Sadly, no. He's already stabbed Hazunoki in the neck and head, making sure that he can't heal that part of his body. He's done with these sorcerers now, and wants to move on to the next step, ending the Culling Game so the binding vow can be fulfilled. And to do that, all the players have to die as soon as possible. But there's one man, not an incarnated sorcerer, standing in Kenjaku's way next. Takaba the comedian. And considering all of his preparations, Kenjaku is visibly stunned by this man's appearance out of nowhere. There was no hint that he was nearby, and no notice from his curses placed around. He's a mystery for Kenjaku, but because he's been given a curse technique and isn't an incarnated sorcerer, Kenjaku's not worried or even interested in Takaba. There is one exception to this, and that's Higuruma and his Judgeman Shikigami. Regardless, because Kenjaku has no expectations for Takaba, he's entering this confrontation with a different mindset than usual. If it were Akotsu or Gojo coming his way, he'd be geared up to fight with everything he's got. What am I trying to say? Well, he's letting his guard down a bit. Maybe the way that Takaba confidently said that he arrived in the wrong place doesn't help. That aside, Kenjaku attacks the comedian anyway, expecting the large curse to end the fight with one attack. Instead, this just makes Takaba annoyed at Kenjaku's behavior and throws the pseudo-immortal into utter confusion. How could someone he thought had no potential survive that easily? The problem is that Kenjaku knows his attack was effective, but for some reason it didn't work the way it was supposed to.
And because Takaba has provided Kenjaku with one of the two things he always longs for, entertainment, he actually smiles. A genuine smile, not the creepy one he had when Gojo figured out that he wasn't actually Geto. Although Kenjaku gets more serious, sending more curses after Takaba, his next attack has no effect either. All Takaba needs to do is make it funny for himself, and the damage is nullified. Not to mention that when Kenjaku goes for Takaba again, he ends up conjuring items from thin air. That includes a bandana for Kenny and cards for himself. This fact, more than anything else, has Kenjaku worried, because Takaba can control whatever items he summons from his imagination. Kenjaku knows that he wouldn't be able to stop the effect, even with the millennia of years he's been alive. But this is Kenjaku we're talking about. He's not going to give up so easily, especially since all curse techniques we've seen have some kind of weakness. It's just a matter of time until he finds a way to take Takaba down. Interestingly, while Kenjaku's conversing with Takaba and trying to get a read on him, the comedian brings up the possibility of giving up the whole merging idea if something more entertaining crossed his path, and Kenjaku isn't opposed to the thought. So while Kenjaku's planning to kill Takaba and move on, the comedian's trying to find a way to end this interaction more peacefully. But seeing as Takaba's goal is laughter, Kenjaku has already figured out his comedic style and the lack of humor it would bring to an audience. In a way, Kenjaku's thorough analysis and review of Takaba's joke makes the comedian start to doubt himself and think negatively. It allows Kenjaku to physically attack Takaba after having broken his confidence, and he's pleased at the blow that he lands on the comedian. And sure, Takaba rejects Kenjaku's opinion since he's not a professional in his industry. But when Takaba suggests that they have a staring contest, the ancient sorcerer just goes along with it and even wins with a surprisingly fun expression. It's another harsh blow to Takaba's ego, allowing Kenjaku to strike his body again. But when Kenjaku insists that Takaba should laugh while he sees Hazunoki's dead body lying on the ground, the situation shifts. For Kenjaku, this moment of weakness seems like his chance to finish off Takaba, but instead the comedian startles him with an impressive bow as he apologizes. Of course, that's not his actual thoughts, but Takaba controlling the way that he thinks and the situation again. Another chance comes up for Kenjaku though. Takaba insists that he wants to make Kenjaku laugh no matter what, and if he can't, then that would make him lose his confidence again, and Kenjaku would gain the upper hand, right? That's when the special grade rebel spirit, Okuro Otake, enters the challenge. But it's no match for Truck-kun, or should I say, Takaba driving a truck and pretending to be a drunk driver. This leads into a number of ridiculous sketches, like Takaba trying to bring a giant goldfish back to life, and Kenjaku goofily shocking him with defibrillators, as well as the most musical game of rock, paper, scissors you'd expect to see in Jujutsu Kaisen. But the more this absurdity continues, the more Kenjaku understands what Takaba's curse technique is and how it works. He even figures out that it involves soul resonance, which explains why Kenjaku can't help but play along with whatever Takaba imagines. But instead of fighting Takaba or taking him down, he ends up joining in, possibly of his own choice eventually. You can only fight against someone's carefree fun for so long. Even when he tries to drown Takaba in the water, it turns into Fanta. And Kenjaku looks so young and filled with joy. Deep down, he feels that he's going to lose if this continues. So instead of allowing Takaba to continue this farce and forcing him into continuous jokes, Kenjaku brings them into something more serious, a live performance on stage. As much as Kenjaku wants it to demolish Takaba's mind and break out of the control he's holding, that's not what makes things start to fall apart. It's the fact that Takaba's enjoying this performance so much, but it's coming to an end. Coming out of that imaginary performance, Takaba's lying down in white clothing, dressed like someone who's passed on. Kenjaku has to admit that he has laughed because of the comedian, and seconds later, Yuta's behind him. It's too late for Kenjaku to react the way that he had planned, with all his barriers and curses and failsafes. He tries to use anti-gravity against Yuta, but it's too late. Takaba's distraction has succeeded long enough to get the ancient sorcerer's head cut off with one clean slice. As much as it seems like this is the end of Kenjaku, him saying that his will shall be carried on kind of leaves us with a bad taste in our mouth. Will Kenjaku just switch bodies again? Is this not the real him, but just a part of his curse technique? There's so much that can happen since Kenjaku's got a collection of curse techniques. He probably has some we've never seen him use. But for now, well, it seems like the Culling Game is over, and if Kenjaku comes back, we might not recognize him right away.
The Culling Game features a whole cast of new characters, on top of the beloved ones from previous arcs having to face dangers like never before. But besides all of the regular people with sudden curse techniques awakened, like Iguruma, the incarnated sorcerers offer the most excitement as experienced sorcerers. So let's run through who's coming up. First, let's take a look at the group of 3 that try their best to take on Yuta with varying levels of success. First, we have Dhruv Lakdwala. Besides having an interesting introduction about this being his second incarnation, he was known to have conquered the Japanese archipelago during the oldest recorded war in the country. By the time we meet him in the Culling Game, he has gained 91 points and finds himself in a 4-way battle, until the cockroach curse spirit drops out to survive, and yes, Yuta shows up during this squabble and shows them who's really to be feared. But before that, we get a view of the gnarly Shikigami that Dhruv commands, and the way that it helped keep him alive through multiple lifetimes. Ryu Ishigori. He's a stronger incarnated sorcerer with a pompadour that's indicative of his curse technique. Despite having less points overall than people like Kashimo and Dhruv, he's considered one of the deadliest players. The secret is in the cannon formed from his hairstyle that shoots out a strong blast without needing to be activated or warmed up. But he's just as efficient and powerful at close range, which is evident in his clash against Yuta, who had to go on the defensive. According to Kenjaku, in the past, Ryu was the top cursed energy outputter in history. It's so high, in fact, that even Yuta, a clear powerhouse in himself, couldn't release the destructive amount that he could. Ryu's easily able to reinforce his body with cursed energy as well, considering his massive storage of it. And his signature move, Granite Blast, could destroy multiple blocks if left unchecked. He also has a domain expansion, but since he released it at the same time as Yuta and Uro, we don't know the details of it, as they canceled each other out, as well as being interrupted. Like Kashimo, Ryu wasn't satisfied with the people that he fought, and incarnated to fight stronger opponents. He ends up in the Culling Game where he fights against Dhruv, Yuta, and Kurourushi. After the domain debacle, Yuta eventually bounces Ryu's blast back at him and leaves him alive. He gives points over to him and later sticks with Uro. When they come across Sukuna, he makes the mistake of facing him and ends up sliced to ribbons. But at least he survived the first attack from him. In my opinion, this was a character with a lot of potential that Gege pretty much wasted. Takako Uro is the other ancient incarnation that faces off with Yuta. Unlike the others though, she's able to survive the Culling Game. But whether it's because she was the captain of the Sun, Moon, and Star Squad, which was during Sukuna's time when he was alive, could be part of it. Speaking of 1,000 years ago, at the time she was an assassin in the Toe Squadron, and got betrayed by another member and killed for crimes that she didn't commit. She had also gotten her name from him. In the Culling Game, her sky manipulation was put on display, a technique that allows her to move as if connected to the sky and areas around people, even floating upside down. Her ability lets her cloak herself in sky and even makes it tangible to her while stretching or distorting it at will. Her main technique is called Thin Ice Break. In the past, she had enough experience to recognize the techniques that Yuta employs, and even has a domain that, we don't get to see. But her weakness to Kurourushi was the cause of her failure, especially since she didn't have a deep well of cursed energy to use after unleashing her domain. She lost her arm to the cockroach and then had it eaten by Rika. And I guess the boys realized her weakness, since Ryu then hit her with a blast and knocked her out. When she came to, she gave Yuta her points, and warned him about becoming like Sukuna, who lost his humanity with his gaining of power. And later on, when she encountered Sukuna for herself, she hid from him and avoided the same death as Ishigori. Reggie Star. This guy comes with literal receipts to a fight, but doesn't use them the way that you normally would. Spilling tea and stuff like that. We don't know much about his past, but in the present, he's extremely confident and knowledgeable about the Culling Game in Kenjaku. He joined forces with fellow past sorcerer Iori, as well as Remy and Chizuru to gain points as a group.
He was clever enough to recruit the sorcerers he found strong, too. His technique involved a recreation of whatever he had a contract with on his receipts, including physical changes in objects. If he gave a command to an object, it would disappear right after. When Megumi showed up, he initially tried to bring him to his side, but was rejected, and they fought. As Iori faced Takaba, he focused on Megumi, using the many paper receipts on his body to conjure up items that he could use in battle. But he didn't know that Megumi had a domain, and used his hollow wicker basket to try and protect himself. Through his receipts, Reggie summoned cars and even a house, but he was forced to release his technique when they landed in a pool. Prior to that, he flexed his cursed energy reinforcement, being able to practically withstand Max Elephant's 3 to 6 tons of weight, since his receipts could only be used through burning. Having them all be drenched in water rendered them useless. He gets mauled by Megumi's demon dog and transfers his points before dying, as well as placing a curse on him with his final breaths. Iori Hazunuki. We finally meet him when he double teams Megumi alongside Reggie. At this point, he has 35 points, as he pulls parts of his body off and uses them as explosives. Takaba rushes in to provide support to Megumi. This technique is only possible for Iori because of his skill at using reverse curse technique to recover any lost body parts he throws away. Unfortunately, his matchup against Takaba doesn't go well, as he's against a comedian who can manipulate any situation according to his jokes and barely gets injured. As the battle draws on, Iori keeps trying to blow up Takaba with little success, since he can heal from any damage through his humor. When they hear that Reggie's dead, Iori decides to stop fighting and leaves. In a different colony, Iori has the misfortune of coming across Kenjaku, who's hunting down any remaining Culling Game players for their cursed energy. They talk briefly, and Iori fights back to the best of his abilities until his neck is pierced. He curses Kenjaku for these actions as he lays dying near another sorcerer who was just culled. Angel, the sorcerer who is at least 1,000 years old, with the goal of hunting and killing Sukuna for his numerous crimes. During the Heian era, she was part of the Deshi Pacification Squad, which also included the famous Sugawara clan's descendants. Her team went against him, but couldn't take him down. Instead of overriding the vessel she was provided with, she shares it with Hana Kurusu. Angel's able to communicate through Hana, creating a small mouth on her body like the early days of Yuji and Sukuna. And Tengen initially introduces Angel and Hana as the means to free Gojo from the prison realm. Since she can cross through borders and colonies, she saves Megumi when he collapses after his fight. After some discussions, she agrees to help with Gojo, if they can help kill Sukuna, who she's had a grudge against for centuries. Angel figures out that Kenjaku wants the foreign military involved for more cursed energy, but she chooses to keep Hana safe, instead of trying to help the soldiers avoid death from curses. Later, she meets the rest of the gang, and Angel wrongly assumes that Tengen is working with Kenjaku, but it allows her to join Megumi to get his sister out of the colony. The problem is Sukuna uses Chain and takes over Megumi's body, attacking Hana when she falls for his trick and putting both her and Angel in peril. The vessel is healed by Shoko and Yuta, but she's no longer able to fight like planned. Still, she helps to get Gojo free as agreed, and it goes down fairly smoothly. Angel suggests that they attack Kenjaku while Sukuna is being fought, and says that Takaba would be the best suited for the job. At the start of the showdown, Angel stays far away alongside Mei Mei and the other non-fighters, but ends up joining as it progressively worsens. Toto helps Angel to use Jacob's ladder from a safe distance, high in the sky, but still she ends up being targeted and protected by him when Sukuna tries to land a massive blow on her. Angel's technique allows for any and all jujitsu to be extinguished or removed, and especially deadly for other incarnated sorcerers who are basically objects placed inside of a living body. She's not able to switch hosts like Sukuna though, since he was in multiple pieces. Angel levitates and flies like her namesake, and even has a halo, and she thinks more like a military member than other sorcerers due to her previous experiences. Jacob's ladder is the max output of her curse technique, within a large circular range shooting down a bright streak of light. Urarame, or Sukuna's subordinate, is a young child taken as a confidant for Sukuna, though he claims it was just to store his food since his icebox broke down. When he was found, he accidentally turned his parents into popsicles when his curse technique manifested for the first time. He also had an ease at cooking, so Sukuna appreciated his talents. But more importantly, Sukuna wanted him to cook humans for him. And when he had that figured out, he became a necessary partner. Back in the Heian era, they were inseparable. And he even tried to keep Yorozu away from Sukuna when she didn't get the hint. In the present, Urarame takes a woman's vessel, so Sukuna doesn't recognize him right away. But he sides with Kenjaku, ignoring that, and strives to get Sukuna back to his full power. And despite not caring for Kenjaku, he accompanies him to meetings with others, all in hopes of Sukuna regaining his true form. His true strength is made evident in Shibuya, when he nearly freezes all of the Jujutsu sorcerers to death as they try to chase down Kenjaku and Gojo in the prison room. He demonstrates two techniques: Frost Calm, shown as a gust of frozen wind blown forward to trap enemies, and Ice Fall, which creates massive ice shards that can be moved freely through the air. But he also reveals a weakness to the poisoned blood of those like Choso that affects the strength of his techniques, though it's remedied quickly by his skill at reverse curse technique. During the Culling Game, he helps to subdue Megumi by preparing a bath for Sukuna, once again serving as indispensable for the King of Curses. In Shinjuku, Urarame is able to withstand Gojo's Hollow Purple, which is beyond impressive considering what it did to so many others. And when it's time for the next challengers, Urarame is ready to back up Sukuna, but gets intercepted by Hakari, yet still manages to deliver the cursed tool. They fight with skills equal to each other for a long time, and once Sukuna loses to the good guys and passes on, Urarame chooses to follow him into the afterlife. In a space between life and death, he's shown alongside Sukuna, who regrets not putting them down a better path. Hagane Daido. He represents one of the few non-sorcerers in the series, but his sword skills make him equal to some of the best without cursed energy, since he was unmatched in his time. This makes him the perfect teacher for Maki, so he helps her fully attain her heavenly restriction potential. He also aids her against Naoya when she struggles against the cursed form of him. Daido has no sword of his own, but borrows the split soul katana that Maki uses from her sister passing. Later, he and Mio end up trapped inside Naoya's domain and badly wounded against the projection technique. He survives the Culling Game and gets a warning from Maki that the higher-ups are seeking out all incarnated sorcerers. She even gives him a sword to protect himself, probably because of how much he helped her. Rokojushi Mio. He's another incarnated sorcerer without a curse technique to speak of. He relies purely on physical power and a simple domain for his sumo matches. Even so, he defeats Maki before she's at her peak. Not much matters to him besides sumo, and he gets upset at having no one to spar with. Surprisingly, when Cursed Naoya comes to attack Maki, Mio successfully headbutts the cursed spirit with physical prowess alone. His simple domain has no binding vow, and only requires agreement from both parties for the sumo match to begin. He helps to train Maki in skills and techniques, helping her to become stronger, along with the sword techniques from Daido. When he's trapped inside Naoya's domain, he doesn't stand a chance against the FPS technique within, and is in a lot of danger, until Maki helps free them with her newly gained skills. After everything's over, Mio is given a warning about Jujutsu officials seeking out incarnated sorcerers, and suggests that he hides in Tokyo, since it's full of cursed spirits and off limits to most people. Yorozu. Remember when Sumiki fell into a coma and Megumi asked Yuji for help saving her? Well, it turns out Yorozu, from the Heian era, incarnated inside her body because of Kenjaku. Unfortunately, when she awakens, she has all of Sumiki's memories and uses them to trick Megumi and his friends to help her get out of the Culling Game. As soon as that's done, she reveals her true psychotic personality and leaves to draw out her one true love, Sukuna. Keep in mind, this is a one-sided love. During the Heian era, many sorcerers were bloodthirsty and extremely powerful. Despite Yorozu's struggle to keep her cursed energy because of her cursed technique of construction, she still made a name for herself in such a battle-filled environment, and even stood toe-to-toe with those who should have been far beyond her. Her curse technique allows Yorozu to create any material she knows well enough, except for cursed tools, but it also requires a lot of cursed energy, compared to other techniques. One of the things that she uses is insect wings to fly with, as well as armor, and her own invention of liquid metal. With the metal, she can make a perfect sphere, which is usually impossible, and using it in her domain expansion makes it even more powerful. As expected, Yorozu gets her meeting with Sukuna, once he takes Megumi's body and plans to kill him to prove her love. In the end, she loses, after putting up a pretty decent fight, and leaves him with a cursed tool that he gets later on against the Jujutsu sorcerers. The tool itself was created through a binding vow before she died, and it was a replica of the Kamotoke, which Sukuna had used in the past. This death just doesn't end the ancient sorcerer, but the body that she was using, and breaks Megumi's spirit at failing to save his sister. Hajime Kashimo. Because Kenjaku made plans hundreds of years ago to ensure his Culling Game would be a hit, and to include many powerful sorcerers, and one of them was Kashimo. But should the main cast, or even Sukuna, be afraid of crossing his path? Well, we'll get into that. But first, let's talk about his past life, which was around 400 years ago. During this time, Kashimo was old, dying, and bored of the battles that gave him no challenge. He knew Kenjaku at that time, but wondered who could give him the fight he was craving. With that in mind, Kenjaku promised that he could come back and face the King of Curses, since he couldn't in that lifetime. And I doubt he minded making the pact, since he didn't have long to live anyway. And do we know anything else about him beyond this? Well, not really. He's just another ancient sorcerer with a craving for blood, it seems, as someone from a more violent period. But anyway, fast forward to the Culling Game, and as someone from a more violent period, Kashimo jumps into a colony to fight strong opponents, and it certainly helps that his young, strong body is back, but he can't find Sukuna anywhere, and thinks everyone he faces is beyond disappointing. Made more evident by the fact that he has 200 points already. And in hopes of spicing things up, Kashimo adds a rule so that all players can know info about who's active, where they are, and everything else needed. Thanks to that, Hikari and Panda know where to find him and team up to enter the colony, while Yuji and Megumi go after Higuruma. As if Panda doesn't have enough on his plate with his father being killed shortly before this, he also stumbles across Kashimo first. Panda nearly gets off-screened, if not for Hikari showing up when he's being held on a staff and refusing to answer Kashimo. Definitely feeling a change in the air, Kashimo smiles as Hikari does a superhero-esque landing nearby. Kashimo's struck, not just by Hikari's fists, but his ability to avoid feeling stunned by his cursed energy. Not to mention the random music playing around them because of Hikari's jackpot being active. As he's finally landing a good hit, reverse curse technique heals Hikari instantly, and he restarts his domain. Hikari gets a jackpot again, but Kashimo refuses to use his curse technique, or to simply survive until the song is done. No, he wants to take down someone who seems invincible and prove just how strong he is. He deals a ton of damage to Hikari's brain so he can't heal as fast, and might have even killed him, if not for Hikari's battle sense and willingness to take big risks in a fight that he's enjoying. Hikari even makes a binding vow, sacrificing his arm so that Kashimo's underwater explosion won't kill him, but by then Kashimo's cursed energy is depleted. On dry land, Kashimo tells Hikari to finish him off, but he won't because he needs Kashimo to join their side against Sukuna, who he wants to face anyway. So it's a win-win. Also, the points Kashimo has would disappear if he died without using them first. From there, the new rule is added, and the agreement is set, though Panda's not too happy about it. Fast forward to the big showdown in Shinjuku. So if you're following so far, we still have no clue about what Kashimo could do in a specific sense. He's been coasting on the element of his cursed energy, and his years of skills as a fighter. Though Kashimo has nothing to do with Gojo beyond being the next one in line against Sukuna, he's forced to follow the date he sets. Also, who would want to argue with Gojo and risk a fight when they're saving everything they have for a fight with Sukuna? I'm surprised he even let Gojo go first though. What if Gojo had killed Sukuna? The deal Hikari made with him would have been pointless. Although I guess Kashimo would have just fought Gojo at that point. Anyway, like I mentioned, Kashimo wants to be next if Gojo should lose against Sukuna, and has the nerve to get annoyed by Hikari and the others who plan to jump in after him. Isn't that exactly what he was implying by placing himself after Gojo? That he thought the current strongest sorcerer would fail and give him a chance to dive in. While the intensity builds and everyone waits to see who will come out on top, Kashimo and the others watch the fight from within Rika. It's not only a way for them to avoid being caught in a massive battle, but to also see it on screens. We don't really get a sense of Kashimo's reaction, but I guess he's pretty restless and crossing his fingers that Gojo fails. For obvious reasons. All the ancient sorcerers want is entertainment, really. And the unthinkable happens. The strongest current sorcerer loses to Sukuna thanks to Maharaga's abilities. Kashimo wastes no time jumping into battle once Gojo's turn is over, with staff at the ready. This is when we finally get to know more about Kashimo's abilities. Let's start off with what we found out previously. This ancient sorcerer is extremely skilled at hand-to-hand combat, has decades of experience in battle, which automatically grants him a high IQ for fighting. He's also skilled at using weapons, like his staff, to aim and control his lightning/electricity with more precision. Prior to incarnating, Kashimo also knew how to use anti-domain techniques. This includes Hollow Wicker Basket, which seems to be one used more often by old sorcerers, but it was pointless against a domain like Hikari's. And then there's the electrified cursed energy that shocks anyone who hits or vaguely touches him. In turn, this makes Kashimo resistant to electricity-related situations. He can also discharge his cursed energy onto others, shocking them with it after accumulating a bigger amount. But the real power comes from Kashimo's mythical beast Amber transformation. It lets him manipulate his flesh, making it extremely powerful, but with a single use, which is why he didn't want to use it on anyone besides Sukuna. Not only does the transformation reshape his physical appearance through electrical currents, but his speed and strength as well. This means he's able to surpass human limits by relying on natural phenomena through his own body, and why it's impossible to reproduce again. But how does this look in a fight? Well, Kashimo leaps onto the battlefield, and Hikari helps keep his side of the deal, making Urarame focus on him so that Kashimo can get started. The god of lightning releases his curse technique, his flesh warping into spikes of electricity. And as if by divine intervention, the curse tool Sukuna was given by Yorozu grants him resistance. Still, at first, Kashimo's increased agility and physical changes seem to overwhelm Sukuna, since he's not able to rely on Maharaga. But the King of Curses unleashes his own incarnation that he had previously put on pause, returning to his historical appearance. Even with his brain synapses firing off much faster than a regular human, and his body and strength at their peak, Kashimo realizes he's facing a perfect enemy. This just means that he'll be having the fun he's finally been waiting for. But it slowly starts to unravel as Sukuna uses his extra arms for hand signs and releases his improved world-cutting slashes upon Kashimo in a way that he can't avoid no matter what. It's so easy for the King of Curses, in fact, that they have time to discuss during the battle about what it means to be the strongest and how one overcomes the loneliness of being on the pinnacle of power. And then when a literal wall of world-cutting slices come towards Kashimo, it's all over. Winning or not, Kashimo would have died after his curse technique was over anyway. His flesh wouldn't have been able to withstand the transformation and the morphing it had done previously. With that in mind, Kashimo returns to his elderly self and has a heart-to-heart with Sukuna about the meaning of strength and how a life can be lived through it. Kashimo challenged many people, not unlike Sukuna, but he went about it differently, and Sukuna never felt disappointed or lonely the way Kashimo had, simply because he lived his life more freely. Who's to say which version of living is more valuable when you find yourself at the top of a ranking? And despite saying he lived how he wanted, Sukuna found himself incarnating in much the same way that Kashimo had. But Kashimo, like Gojo, had one foot on the side of humanity and connections, and the other seeking ultimate strength, which may be why they both ended up with the same conclusion to their stories. At least Kashimo got what he wanted in the end, a challenger worthy of his life.
In this video, we're going to be talking about Suguru Geto of Jujutsu Kaisen and his evolution into destruction. As far as we can tell, Geto's upbringing must have been pretty normal. He attended school along with Satoru and Shoko, causing trouble for Yaga Masamichi, sure, but otherwise not displaying any issues. He certainly didn't have the same kind of burdens that the Zhoniin clan or the Kamo clan members have revealed to us. Even through conversations he has with Gojo, we can see that Geto held a positive view of the world, and he thought it was important for the strong and those capable of protecting to be there for the weaker people in society. But at that time, we still see that Geto has a bit of a temper when it comes to his beliefs. Regardless, Geto held Jujutsu users and his fellow sorcerers in high regard. He respected them and enjoyed fighting alongside them. When he and Gojo are given the special mission to accompany the star plasma vessel to Tengen so the immortal can merge with the young girl, Geto accepts, albeit with a hidden agenda. From the get-go, he and Satoru plan to let Riko go back to her regular life, if that's what she wants. In part, this is because of their belief in having people be free to choose their path, but also because Yaga hinted at not agreeing with the assimilation ritual. Sure, it only comes up every 500 years, but at this point it gets both tedious and unfair to the young women being erased from existence. With that in mind, Geto goes through the motions of protecting Riko, accompanying her, and even forming a bond with her and her maid Kuroi in that short period of time. The problem is the two groups getting in the way of their role as bodyguards, Q and the Time Vessel Association. When Toji is hired by the non-jujutsu sorcerers, in part because they can't fight, but also likely to prove a point, the same way Toji wants revenge for his treatment, things start to take a turn, in a bad way. After Toji puts a bounty on Riko's head, Geto's forced to be more aware than he's ever been of possible attacks. His powerful curse technique is put to the test like never before. But then again, this isn't a normal task. This is something that only comes up every few centuries. And it doesn't help that Tengen has amassed such a huge following due to their age. As time passes and a little Okinawa break happens, Geto lets his guard down once inside Tengen's barrier. In fact, so does Gojo, who is on the receiving end of a deadly attack. Even though Geto doesn't want to abandon his friend, he has a mission to finish, and he trusts Gojo more than anyone else he knows. So he brings Riko and Kuroi down into the tombs of the Star Corridor to meet with Tengen, but not before offering Riko the chance to resume a normal teen life. And yet, that's cut very short as soon as Toji shoots her through the head, completing his assassination. The anger that Geto unleashes here is in part because of the life that was taken, but also because of the possible loss of his closest friend Gojo. They were the strongest after all. How could anyone be able to take down Gojo? Despite unleashing two incredibly powerful curses to attack Toji, the only damage he sustains is a lost ear and a small haircut. In fact, Toji defeats Geto with almost no difficulty and shows off that he's just a dude with no cursed energy whatsoever. Without getting his worm curse stolen, Toji took down two of the most powerful Jujutsu users just like that. What's important to keep in mind here is the word Toji uses to describe himself: a monkey. And if he's at a lower level of evolution and still overcame the so-called strongest people, this sticks with Geto and makes him start to question his opinion of normal people around him. And when Geto finds Gojo back from the dead, he picks up Toji's abandoned cursed spirit that can carry weapons, because Toji's dead and it needs a new owner. From the beginning, it's clear that Geto despises curses, and especially having to consume them to be able to use their powers in fights. This wouldn't be a problem if curses didn't exist, if people knew what they were bringing into the world through their negative emotions, if normal people could fight their own battles, right? A year later, even with his mind in disarray, Geto does his duty of investigating and fighting curses. With Gojo now at the pinnacle of the Jujutsu world, Shoko not taking on difficult missions, that leaves him alone by default. While he's battling with himself, Geto meets Yuki, a former star plasma vessel, and she jokingly suggests he kills every non-sorcerer. And of course, she means it as a hypothetical solution, and as someone with a grudge against society. Even so, Geto hasn't decided on the road he wants to take. He's still a good person. Not long after, Haibara, a younger Jujutsu sorcerer and Nanami's partner, is killed while on their mission.
The curse had been stronger than initially thought. This causes Geto's dark thoughts to return, and visions of his friends being dead from trying to fight off everything on their own. A minority against curses created by a majority. And this is when Geto gets sent to investigate a village. In this place, the people are convinced two young girls are the ones responsible for the events that happened prior, and even keeping them locked up in a cage. When Geto realizes that they can see curses, and have been both ostracized and punished for it, he loses any sense of responsibility he had towards the non-curse users. They don't deserve to be protected. They should just be eradicated if they can't appreciate the effort and the lives lost for their sake. And that's what Geto does. He kills 112 residents of that small village, freeing the two girls from their torture. And due to Jujutsu regulations, Geto is now considered a wanted criminal that must be executed for his actions. Maybe if he had only killed 2 people, he still would have been okay. But over 100? Geto was sending a message. His choice was made. In Shinjuku, the first person Geto sees after the incident is Shoko, who asks a few questions and calls for Gojo right away. Geto doesn't deny what he's done, and certainly doesn't feel any remorse, even after admitting he's killed his parents as well. In fact, he doubles down on his new ideals, mirroring the same aggressive opinion that Gojo had in previous years. Geto doesn't want to waste his time protecting the weak, he wants them gone. If they can't figure out the damage they're causing to people who can't see and control curses. For a brief moment, Geto considers that he would be able to get rid of the world of monkeys, if only he had Gojo's insane abilities. It wouldn't be such a grandiose dream in that scenario. Geto turns his back, and with Gojo unable to finish him off like he was meant to, this leaves Geto time to not only put a group, but plans into place. It's at this point that Geto takes over a culty organization, where he rids regular people of their curses for a price. The money is nice, but the goal is to get as many curses under his control as he can, despite his help being appreciated, and also lowering the amount of curses that Jujutsu users have to take care of. The reasoning behind his actions is dangerous, not to mention the way he extorts rich people in exchange for protection from curses that are under his control. The very proximity of non-curse users turned Geto's stomach, almost more than the act of swallowing the curses that he takes from them. But it's all worth it, if it means never having to deal with a cursed spirit in the future. Eventually, Geto catches wind of a special grade curse attached to a new Tokyo Jujutsu High student, Akotsu Yuta. With or without the boy's compliance, Geto needs to get his hands on the cursed spirit named Rika. But before this, he wants to see what she can do, and how strong Rika really is. So he tests the boy during a small mission at an elementary school by placing a curse there to attack the kids. When that isn't enough, he releases a semi-grade 1 level curse, the one that Inumaki was meant to remove at the shopping center, trying to force Yuta's hand. Oh, and he drops a secondary veil to block Ishiji from removing his own. All he gets for his efforts is Yuta's ID card, leaving behind traces of his cursed energy that Gojo recognizes. Not long after Geto has left a trail, he and his gang drops in, literally, from the sky to greet Yuta and the other Jujutsu users around. While there, he tries to recruit Yuta, but ends up insulting him and getting the attention of a number of faculty members around, including his former best friend Gojo, though he threatens a war called the Night Parade of 100 Demons for 2 locations, Shinjuku and Kyoto. On December 24th, Geto's real goal is to get Yuta alone and forcibly take Rika from him. Geto sends out his posse to the locations as promised, but they're just there to stall, so he has time to steal Rika away. To succeed, Geto has to kill Yuta though. And that proves to be not only a difficult but unreachable goal for our ambitious curse manipulation user. Sure, he defeats Maki, Inumaki, and Panda with not much effort, but Yuta is different. He's a part of Gojo's bloodline. Despite unleashing and combining every single curse in his possession, which is around 4,461, bringing out his own special grade curse, forming a massive ball of cursed energy called Maximum Uzumaki. Geto can't surpass Rika and Yuta's bond and power, and when he's on his last leg, dragging himself away from the battle in awe of what he saw Rika perform, he comes across his old friend Satoru. It's obvious from the situation that Geto knows where this is going. This is the end of the line for him. Regardless, He wants to make sure his family got away safe. But Gojo asks him the same thing he once did to Toji. Any last words? The result may be the same, but the effect it has on Gojo is vastly different. Unlike Toji, Geto never directly attacked Gojo, and never intended to. He even gave his best friend the chance to end him before it got to this point. And at that point, we assumed Geto had died. But, as we see in the beginning of Season 1, Geto returns, looking more like a Frankenstein monster than his usual overconfident self. But he stays in the shadows, and makes sure that no one from Jujutsu High ever catches sight of him. Did Gojo not end his life after all? Or has Geto returned from the dead somehow? It wouldn't be the first time a character has escaped death. If you want to know the truth behind Geto's appearance, you'll have to watch the Shibuya arc in Season 2 of Jujutsu Kaisen. Mahito, the Curse of Humanity. This charismatic patch-faced curse was created from negative energy humans feel towards each other. This includes things like fear, hatred, envy, and anger. All the things people try to control, but seeing as most regular people can't help feeling these things, and also can't handle the cursed energy that's made as a result, Mahito was bound to come into being sooner or later. His name implies he's the true human, after all. As the youngest of the special grade curses we meet, working alongside Geto, Mahito is undeniably adaptable, childish, and driven by his desire for chaos and deadly confrontations. But let's dive into his history a bit more thoroughly. Right after Yuji returns from the dead, he's sent on an unusual mission with Nanami Kento. At the same time, Mahito befriends Junpei as a means to use him and sow seeds of hatred within him, but also seeming to specifically want to mess with Yuji, since he's not allowed to kill him. Considering that Mahito isn't the planning type, this idea likely only popped up after he realized how close Yuji and Junpei were getting. Let's step back for a second though. The only reason Mahito was able to sink his claws into Junpei was because of the bullies in his school, and how no one else paid attention to the abuse he was going through. Mahito offered Junpei a means to fight back. At the same time, Junpei's anger and isolation became more fuel for both Mahito's cursed power and his entertainment. The next time we see the cursed spirit, he fights Nanami when they encounter each other in the sewers, and he touches Nanami's soul briefly, causing an injury that also works as foreshadowing for later in the arc. In fact, Nanami's curse technique might be strong against most curses, but not Mahito. Whether you want to see this as the worst of humanity going against the best of humanity, and that's why it's such a bad matchup. Nanami wins the fight, but at the cost of a deep fear being planted, and a nasty abdomen wound. Actually, Mahito might have turned their fight into a draw. The ease with which he manipulates his own soul, saving himself from desperate situations, is astounding. Mahito heals up quickly and returns to grooming Junpei in the worst way. But we can't give him all the credit, since it's fake Geto that provides the finger to cause the real chaos. As we know, Junpei fights Yuji in a desperate cry for help when he's coming around to Jujutsu High, and the idea of having friends who can see curses. That's when Mahito makes his move. He shows his true colors as a special grade curse and transforms him right in front of Yuji's eyes. Technically, this was meant to force Yuji into making a vow with Sukuna so the curses could all work together to take down the world. But what happened is Sukuna already made a pact with Yuji that he'd forgotten about, which left Mahito laughing at the situation. Another thing came into play then. The fact that Yuji was one of the only people who could hurt Mahito's soul directly. They fought, with Yuji completely enraged and Mahito laughing and changing shape and weaponry with his limbs. But when Mahito put Yuji in a tight spot, touching his soul to attack him, he accidentally touched Sukuna within him. All he got was a warning this time. We know that Mahito likes to toy with his food anyway. Too bad for Scarface though. Nanami joined the fight and helped Yuji to bombard Mahito with attacks left and right. Knowing he was getting closer to expiring, he suddenly awakened something that Nanami himself hadn't attained. Domain expansion. It's called self-embodiment of perfection. This domain is similar to Jogo or Gojo's in terms of the guaranteed attack it offers the user. For Mahito, that means that instead of needing to touch his enemy directly, being inside the domain guarantees their soul is attacked. There aren't many people who could overcome something that dangerous. With that in mind, Yuji's pushed out of the newly formed domain, and Nanami's kept in since he's vulnerable to the effect. After a flashback and death flags, Yuji breaks into Mahito's domain to stop the sure hit effect of it, but he inadvertently triggers Sukuna's defense too. The warning, despite this situation not being Mahito's fault, wasn't heeded, and Mahito struck violently. At this point, Mahito has used up most of his cursed energy and can't fight back well, so he escapes to the sewers. Despite Nanami's quick reaction and sending Ino after him, he gets away without a problem. This is also the moment he decides to destroy Yuji's soul, rather than his body. In other words, Sukuna's too strong to fight, so Mahito can take away everything that matters to Yuji instead. Going forward during the sister exchange arc, Mahito returns, but as more of a background character, or rather an assassin with the goal of collecting cursed wounds and a finger from Jujutsu High, while his allies do more visible work. Despite seeming carefree and unaffected by most things, Mahito is ready to strike when Haruta Shigemo hints at wanting to kill off Hanami. This is also an interesting moment considering Haruta and Mahito have similarly playful personalities. Later on, after Mahito collected the items their gang needed to put the plan in motion, he's taking it easy again. I gotta say, he's got a chill existence. Afterwards, without a hint of remorse, he reincarnates the youngest cursed womb, Kechizu, into a helpless man's body. Later, he goes about the day as if nothing is going on. He's even seen playing games with fake Geto and Choso. When the latter snaps one of the pieces for the game board, Mahito takes it harder than you'd expect, funnily enough. But he certainly doesn't seem to care that the death wounds he collected were taken out so fast. Instead, he seems gleeful at the thought of not only facing a stronger Yuji, but seeing him face the aftermath of ending something that was partly human. Just like when Mahito unleashes his transfigured creations. Right before the big start to one of the deadliest arcs in Jujutsu Kaisen, Mahito had to follow through with a binding vow he had with Kokichi Muda, aka Mekamaru. That is, Mahito had to help the man live freely again, since he provided valuable and secret information to the special grade curses. After the deal was done, Mahito wasted no time going after him and his massive mech robot. Not only did Mahito force Mekamaru to use up his 17 years worth of cursed energy in the fight, but he purposely pretended to lose at certain moments to get his guard down. Mahito's domain makes another appearance, and this time it's more sophisticated than it was during his fight against Yuji and Nanami. Eventually, Mahito pierces Mekamaru through his battle bot and leaves with a hop in his step. Fake Geto tells him not to risk himself like that. Not knowing that it was all a game to Mahito, every moment was planned for. The youngest special grade curse is already growing up, in his own way. Going forward into the Shibuya incident arc, this is when Mahito is fully let loose and becomes the strongest version of himself. After a long talk with fake Geto and friends, it's decided they absolutely need to wear Gojo down, at least psychologically. And for that, Mahito's curse technique is going to play a big role since he can target many people quickly. It wouldn't be Mahito if he didn't make a buttload of transfigured monsters attack people. So of course, he makes a train full of them and sends them off to where Jogo and Choso are playing tag with Gojo. Having never met the blindfolded sorcerer, Mahito can't help but test Gojo's infinity barrier, which blocks him as expected. Less predictable, though, is how Mahito floats away from Gojo's attempt at striking back. Either the strongest user wasn't really trying, or Mahito has some tricks that work against him. Regardless, his sneaky escape allows him to team up with Choso and slaughter dozens of humans in front of Gojo, and gets him a first-class ticket to Infinite Void for 0.2 seconds. Lucky for him, Fake Geto's plan works, and Gojo's sealed, because Mahito was still stuck in a catatonic state afterwards. This is because 6 months worth of information comes pouring into his brain. After a brief discussion with the brain in Geto's body about the soul versus the body, he makes his way to the other Jujutsu sorcerers for some sadistic fun. Unfortunately for us, his first major victim turns out to be Nanami, who he noticed was already weakened by both Dagon's domain and Jogo's unimaginably hot flames. While looking Yuji in the eyes, he splatters Nanami as a way to break Yuji's spirit since he can't destroy his body directly. Yuji goes after him with a rage beyond what he felt after Junpei, but Mahito shows off 2 new techniques: Soul Multiplicity and Body Repel. The first one allows him to combine his transfigured people and make them stronger, while body repel forces those modified souls that clash to become extremely powerful for a brief time. You know, more of Mahito's horror-esque tactics. And let's not forget the double of himself he had strategically sent elsewhere to ensure Yuji's mental breakdown. You just gotta love how cunning he is. As expected, Yuji continues to fight against the main body, and Nobara faces the weaker double with not much trouble. Mahito even admits that Nobara is another natural enemy for damaging his soul. In a masterful play, Mahito switches them and causes Nobara to be fatally wounded through his childish running around. So far, it looks like this was the end for her, along with Yuji's sanity. Just as planned, Mahito has the upper hand, having accomplished all the pain he wanted on Yuji's mental state. That's when Mahito starts to chip away at him with his more advanced techniques. This includes Black Flash, which we'd only seen the good guys use before. Like Nanami and Todo explained, it just means Mahito had reached a new level of focus and understanding of cursed energy. After some taunting and a brutal beatdown, Todo shows up again and they tag team Mahito. But this just helps him to grow and to even enhance his cursed energy further through this difficult battle, the same way he was able to expand a domain while facing Yuji and Nanami in the past. Mahito is even beyond 100% of his capabilities. This explains why he can create polymorphic soul isomers and change his own shape more drastically without losing power. In case it's not clear, the isomers are transfigured humans that are more stable and capable of being combined to create a longer lasting threat. This cheerful sadist even copies Gojo's 0.2 second domain against them, so he won't get backlash from Sukuna's soul within Yuji. It's not enough to kill them, but it gets the job done against Todo's technique that he cuts down, along with transfiguring his hand. But why did the locket distract Mahito? Did the fact that he was created from humans leave him a hint of attachment in a weird way? I guess it doesn't matter, he's with the curses. His ultimate form, instant spirit body of distorted killing, is evident of that, since he loses any human traits. But the massive boost in defense and strength comes at a cost. Mahito loses steam from fighting long against high-level opponents, so he tries to bait Yuji into being countered, the way that he did with Mekamaru, but he doesn't expect Divergent Fist to strike him. He's also fooled by Todo pretending that he can still clap with only one hand. He's at the end of his rope, which means Mahito flees and comes across fake Geto, who he mistakenly thinks that he can take down to power himself up once more. Before Shibuya, Mahito figured out what Geto's end goal for him was. As someone born of the darkest parts of humanity, he could tell that the sorcerer was devious, but I guess the thrilling fights he provided were enough for Mahito to go on a doomed path. In the end, Mahito's taken through curse manipulation and turned into an orb, used as a way to trigger the Culling Game fake Geto had planned. Mahito ended up a pawn for an ancient curse user. It's fitting, considering how much he toyed with Jujutsu users during his life. And that's the end of him.
Actually, no, it's not. In the very final chapter, Mahito's still loitering around in between spaces in the afterlife. Sukuna meets him there after losing to Yuji, at least remembering who he is despite their short encounter. Mahito points out how he knew all along that Sukuna wasn't the purely evil, uncaring monster that he pretended to be, and actually was lashing out against those who scorned or mistreated him while alive. As a curse born of humans, it wouldn't be hard for him to figure that out. Remember, he represents all the negative aspects of people. So Sukuna was trying to become a full curse, but never would have reached it despite that. When it's all said and done, Sukuna decided to take a different path, should he get another chance. And for someone who's purely chaotic like Mahito, that's a garbage response. Not only is he disappointed, but he's left completely alone in the darkness with his desire for endless destruction. As he points out, he's the only unruly child left, which makes it sound like even all the other special grade curses have moved on to better things. Does that mean, in the end, Mahito was the only truly villainous character of the series? Even after losing and dying, he refuses to change. Or maybe that's commentary on the darkness within us all? So today we're going to be taking a look at Toji Fushiguro's backstory, or at that time,
Toji Zenin. And this is coming from the unofficial one-shot manga called Hibernation. It opens up with us seeing presumably a 6-year-old Toji. The members of the Zenin clan have him in front of a cursed spirit and they ask, "What can you see?" Toji says, "I don't see anything at all." Toji is lying, of course, because he can actually see this curse. Toji was born with heavenly restriction. This is an inherent ability that reduces Toji's cursed energy to 0. This is unusual because even humans who are non-sorcerers even have a little bit of cursed energy in them, not 0. So in the case of Toji, his 0 cursed energy causes a side effect that gives him superhuman abilities, super strength, speed, durability, and super senses. It's these super senses that allows him to perceive curses despite not being a sorcerer. We then cut to the spring when Toji was 6, and we see that his mother had taken her life. We could assume this because the Zenin clan is awful, especially at this time, and the most awful of them seems to be Toji's father, who tells Toji to straight up clear that up at once. It spoils our view of the flowers, referring to his mother's body. But Toji surprisingly agrees and says that that was the only thought that crossed his mind, showing that Toji has already been afflicted, but this is only the beginning. We come to Toji training with the other Zenin clan members at the Zenin base, and while his fights are somewhat competitive, he eventually overcomes his opponent and beats them down, until his father comes over to him trying to get his attention. But when Toji is lost in the beatdown, his father begins to beat him down, referring to him as scum and telling him that he's got some special training for him today. As they're walking to the special training, Toji's dad tells him that when Junichi was around his age, he was going out on missions with sorcerers, and now he can handle simple missions on his own. Junichi Zenin is the guy with the long hair that we see in the stretch of chapters when Maki destroys the entire Zenin clan. And it also turns out that he was able to exercise a grade 2 curse all by himself, which for some reason Toji's dad thinks that like a grade 2 curse is like really powerful when it's like actually kind of weak, at least in the grand scheme of things. But he winds up just throwing Toji into like this pit, and we find out that this is the same kind of pit place that Maki's father threw her into along with Mai. And that was the whole sequence that led to Mai giving her own life to create the soul-splitting blade for Maki. However, this story is not as easy for Toji, because the cursed spirits in this pit eviscerate Toji, pushing him to the point of near death, which apparently doesn't even faze his father as he asks him, "Oh, still not dead yet? The sooner you quit fighting the inevitable, the easier it'll be for you." And he calls him a monkey, which is similar to what Geto was calling humans. We see that the Zenin clan pretty much hates any part of their family that doesn't have curse techniques, pretty much. Of course, this parallels to how Maki was ostracized as well. But we cut to 3 days later and Toji wakes up. He somehow survived his encounter with the cursed spirits and was able to recover. And we see that this is the instance that left Toji with the scar on the right side of his mouth. But it also shows how incredibly powerful heavenly restriction is, as it only took 3 days for Toji to completely heal from all of his wounds. Then we go into a training montage of where Toji says he can no longer distinguish between day and night, training against other sorcerers or being thrown into the pit and having to fight against the cursed spirits, while also being stabbed in the hand by his father. He says when he reached the point where he couldn't feel pain anymore, a new pain came along. But he knew that he was tough enough and that he couldn't be killed. And realizing this, he knows that all he can do is endure. And that's exactly what he did, because this was slowly making Toji more and more powerful, to the point of where he would eventually become the strongest of the Zenins. We come back to Toji's father checking on him, and he berates him the most that we've seen so far, calling him a sack of crap, and that there's no point in worthless trash like him even being alive. This is because he realizes that Toji is getting stronger and more resilient, and he also tells him to not let that get to his head just because he's sturdier than the average monkey. So he decides to leave him in the pit with the cursed spirits for a couple more hours, until a much bigger cursed spirit encounters Toji. We'll later find out that this is a grade 1 cursed spirit, and it nearly kills Toji, until Toji realizes that his mother very likely went to hell. But he takes solace in it because at least she got free from the Zenin clan. And this gets Toji to his breaking point where he says, "Throw it all away, all of it." all of his emotions, all of his memories, just get rid of it and just become a cold-blooded killing machine. And he winds up taking a broken piece of stone and stabs the cursed spirit in the neck. He then hops on its back and begins to stab it just like how he stabbed Gojo in the leg, eventually killing it. Then we come back to Toji's father, conversating with another member of the Zhoniin clan, talking about how they kept a grade 1 down there. Toji's father saying, "Oh, you're getting cold feet now?" The family head himself gave us his blessing for this, meaning they wanted Toji to fight against this grade 1 cursed spirit, knowing that he probably wouldn't be able to survive, but given how much of an awful sociopath that Toji's father is, he didn't really care, because if he survived, oh hey, he got stronger, but if he died, oh well, I don't have to look at this monkey anymore. However, the former happened, but given that Toji, as he said, threw it all away, this is now the birth of Toji Fushiguro, or, you know, that person that he'll eventually become. I mean, he's not literally Fushiguro at this point, but Toji looks up at his father and says, "I'll kill you all." Then we cut to Toji outside, looking up at the tree that his mother hung herself from. We don't know if Toji killed his father in this instance, but I'm pretty sure that he did. We then see a man approach Toji, who I think is Junichi, and he asks Toji if he's going to string himself up on the tree like his mother did. And Toji says, "Even if I did, it probably wouldn't even kill me." Which is true. Toji is so incredibly powerful that being hung from a tree would do nothing. But going further, Toji says, besides, it would be a shame to go out without raising a little hell first. It then cuts to Toji in the city. He's now dressed in civilian clothes, looking around at people with the curses attached to them, and says, now, what to do next. And that is the end of Toji's backstory from the one-shot manga Hibernation. Now let me go into how this came to be made and why it actually really makes sense and why it's probably very accurate to what Toji's backstory actually is. So at the end of Hibernation, the author Yu says when he read the Jujutsu Kaisen fan book, and that's because in the fan book, Gege was asked, when did Toji start to fall afoul of the Zhoniin family? And what kind of abuse did he receive? And Gege said that from when he was little, they do things like fighting him into a pit of cursed spirits, etc. It was from that bit of bullying that he got the scar at the corner of his mouth. So yeah, this all makes sense to me, and while it's unofficial, I would like to think that this is essentially what happened to Toji and what led to him becoming the ultra mega Chad that he is now. It's just too bad that Gege decided to not do this himself, because he could have easily just shoehorned this in as one flashback chapter in the series. But at least we have this. That's pretty much it for the video, guys. Let me know what you think about this in the comments, and if you liked it, please give it a like and please subscribe if you haven't already. Have a great day. I'll see you in the next one.